The Longevity Investors Conference brings together a highly select audience of the most prominent investors in the field. It takes place between the 24th and 27th of September in Gstaad, Switzerland, and it's one of the main events to bring together academia, business, and others to discuss the latest trends and opportunities and provide really the relevant insights as to what's happening in the worlds of longevity and rejuvenation. Now, speaking at the conference to represent academia will be the director of the Einstein Institute for Aging Research. He's an absolute pillar of the research community, and I'm delighted to say that he's joining us today. Nir, lovely to see you.
Good. I don't need introduction if all you have is, 50 followers. But otherwise, it's good to introduce me. Thank you very much.
Well, we've got a growing number of followers. We had 5 million people on our website last year. So yeah, things are growing well.
So I'm happy you introduced me. I'm also the president of the Academy for Health and Lifespan Research, which is the academy that has the 64 top academician or top geroscientists. So I'll represent this association, this academy also. Thank you.
So, Nir, you've been attending the Longevity Investors Conference since 2020. So how have you seen the event evolve over these years?
It's terrific. Look, first of all, it takes few times for people to actually click and understand and know how to maneuver things. For example, it takes them a while until they hear you and know that if you don't want to lose money immediately, you should invest in many companies, but that it'll get better. I can also tell you that there are investors that I've consulted with. There is one investors who I'm actually helping him spend $10 million just initially this year in order to see how things are going. So I sense the excitement, and I sense the persistence, and I sense that they're newcomers too. And I predict that they're all going to be really happy, not only in Gstaad, but in coming into our area.
Let's talk a little bit about some of your work, Nir, because you're very active in the space. You're very across the fact that we don't want to emphasize growing old with sickness. We want to have health span and longevity. So, what are the recent advancements that either you've been working or the areas that you've been across with your colleagues that are happening in demonstrating that the space is moving forward?
I want to highlight something that I'm going to highlight that is really new. And it happened to us without anybody noticing. There are 4 FDA-approved drugs that we call them, and I'll tell you who's we later, gerotherapeutics. How would you call a drug gerotherapeutic? You would call a drug gerotherapeutic if the drug has shown to affect what we call the hallmarks of aging, which is an important concept that investors have to know, because you actually invest in one of those hallmarks of aging usually, but because those hallmarks of aging are all related, then you don't know what you're getting. You might think you're getting something in metabolism, but you're actually improving immunity, right? So hallmarks of aging that in animals, preclinical study, they extended health span of the animals and also extended the lifespan of the animals. There are actually 12 drugs that answer that, but only 4 drugs happen to also mark the other part, and that's what happens in human. And in humans, what we want to see is a drug that was designed for one indication, and in a clinical study, all of a sudden it's noted that it also affects other disease and other medical problems. And finally, to see a drug that over a 5-year project have shown to decrease overall mortality. Okay, not disease-specific mortality, but overall mortality. Mm-hmm. And so if you think of how you design a study, okay, those studies has been done. Those studies have been done that are showing that you gave it for one example, it affects other diseases and overall mortality. That's for us, gerotherapeutics. Right. I'll throw the names of the drugs. By the way, the scale that we have is out of 12. The the one who gets 12 is SGLT2 inhibitors, which is an interesting story.
Mm-hmm.
It's an anti-diabetic drug, but it's prescribed much more for non-diabetic patients for both preventive of deterioration in kidney disease and cardiovascular disease. The other drugs are metformin, 11 points, biphosphonates for osteoporosis, 11 points, and 10 points is GLP-1 inhibitor that actually I think can move up now.
Right. Okay.
And let me talk about the GLP-1 inhibitor as an example, and why do I call it gerotherapeutics? And I call it gerotherapeutics for, first of all, because it targets hallmarks of aging, more than one. That when you give it to animals, they actually live longer, even those who don't, thin animal, they don't lose weight. And in humans, it was designed for diabetes. And by the way, I'm a diabetologist. I'm once or twice a month treat diabetic patients. And I've been using this kind of family for 7 years. So I know a lot about those drugs. But when you give those drugs to diabetic, they also lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's for obesity. When you give it to obesity, it prevents cardiovascular disease. It prevents Parkinson. It prevents hepatic steatosis. And it works really on two levels. First of all, it's because obesity drives aging. Okay? Like in COVID, we knew that if you're over the age of 80, you have 180 times more chances of dying than if you're in your 20. But if you have obesity at any age, your chances of dying is eightfold.
Right.
I should really have started with my early trials with caloric restriction, which is the major way. Caloric restriction has some of the obese thinness, right? It's not only. Those GLP-1 inhibitors are also affecting other diseases in a way that's not related to the obesity.
Yeah, and can I just ask you, in relation to GLP-1s, which of course have got much attention now, they're number 4 in your list with 3 above it. So that's quite interesting. With GLP-1s and the Alzheimer's neuroprotective elements that are coming out of that, is that now starting to be appearing in human studies? I know there was a retrospective study, but not actually in part of a clinical trial. Are you aware of that happening?
Yeah, what I told you is clinical trials, not Alzheimer, but Parkinson. Those are clinical trials. New England Journal of Medicine have almost every week some trial with some GLP-1, right, more specific or less specific. But I want to say the following. We have 4 drugs, and those are FDA-approved drugs. And I want to make a point out of it. If you ask people, do you want supplement or do you want drugs? They will tell you, I want supplement. That's crazy. We don't know much about supplements. We don't know much about the combination of supplements. We, by the way, recently learned on a study with 7 million people over 12 years that those who are taking multi-supplements are 4% increase in mortality. So we don't know how the supplements are interacting with each other. The FDA-approved drugs have safety because they wouldn't be otherwise out there. They have efficacy. They have years of use. And for me, most important, you need the doctor to sign it. I don't want longevity for now to be outside of the medical care because we want to show responsibility. So what we're doing now is we're taking those drugs. We are talking about all the clinical studies. By the way, I think the GLP-1 will move now or will be equal. It'll be 11.
Okay.
It will move up now. But this is the point. We have 4 drugs, and we have, based on those clinical studies, to suggest if you have a patient who say, that come to the doctor and said, I want to do something about my aging, which drug to choose. Okay. Yeah. If you're thin, I'm not sure the GLP-1 is the drug that you want to use. If you have osteoporosis, maybe you start with biphosphonates, right? If you have kidney disease, maybe you start with SGLT2. So we want to come up with a recommendation that you can use it. Doctor can repurpose. Yeah, that's another thing. Doctors can repurpose drugs all the time. It's legal. Yes. They're not going to get into trouble with that. So repurposing drugs is good. Let's get going. We have those important tools. They have effects that are impressive. 30% on everything, on prevention, disease, and clinical trial. Remember, when you have 30% of event, it's all analyzed as intention to treat. Okay, when you look at the people who actually took the treatment, it's sometimes 50%. So we have those drugs. We have to choose the right drugs to the right people and start educating doctors. You can prescribe those drugs and they'll have real
That's
effects.
very, very interesting there. So presumably you'll be talking about this at the conference in Gstaad.
Right.
So let's talk about the conference in relation to people that are coming, right? So you're going to have VC investors, maybe a few angel investors, but a lot of family offices. What are you finding when you're out there speaking with investors? What do you see? Are people starting to understand now that this is really happening and this is a major industry that's ramping up?
Yes, I think they do that. But look, they're right. They're smart people, and people are selling them all the time things, right? And I think what the Gstaad conference does, and I think it's a lot thanks to you. I might even quoting you now when I'm saying that. When you get into this field, if you really don't want to lose money in the first years, invest in 65 companies or invest in three venture capitals or something like that. Okay, so we have a lot of hopes. Okay, some of them will become promises, uh, but even if we have the most interesting story, uh, I think investors have to know that for a while and until they learn kind of the playground, they should know that they could actually start by investing in venture capitals or in other companies, and it'll be okay. They won't lose a lot of money. And I'm sure that once they're in the field, they'll make money
Yeah.
if they stay with us.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we're seeing the activity ramping up near, and the conference will be highlighting some of that. I'll be talking about the latest industry data, but let's talk about what's happening perhaps in the wider sphere of longevity. We obviously are aware of the work that's happening with cellular reprogramming. Obviously, as you mentioned, there are some very powerful supplements out there that are being used in clinical trials and are being used against specific diseases and some of those age-related diseases. What are you seeing in the space outside of your own world that's exciting you?
Um, Look, I think that from a marketing perspective, the hallmarks of aging have been really important for us. Again, hallmark, you can say something is hallmark of aging if it becomes bad when you're old or when your animal is old, and when you fix it, your animal lives healthier and longer. And thanks God they're interacting. It's kind of funny if you have a true gerotherapeutic, which means you take an old cell or an old organ, an old body, and you make it younger, you get a lot of things that are changing. And those are really the hallmarks of aging. And what's new in the hallmarks of aging, we started with 7, we went to 9, and now they're
Yeah.
14. And we're welcoming each one. By the way, I don't think all the 14th are as I said, that they actually have shown that if you fix them, they increase lifespan. I don't think they're true to all of them, but it's a good start. And so, for example, microbiome wasn't part of the initial hallmarks, and now I'm less sure about that. But now it's part of the hallmark because there's some suggestion, although no proof in animals, except one model that I'm not sure is good, that it really extends lifespan. But we have more hallmarks, and again, the more hallmarks we have, investors have to think about the hallmarks as a pipeline. Why? Because let's say you take a drug like metformin, and you know that it has metabolic effect. Okay, so it will rejuvenate one of the hallmarks effect, that is metabolism.
Hmm.
But guess what? Metformin in clinical studies prevent half of the hospitalization and death and long COVID, from COVID. Because it's not only doing metabolism, it's doing immunity also. So when you think of drugs, you might develop something, let's say like metformin, but what you're going to sell the drug is to prevent flu or
Yeah.
COVID. Okay,
Hmm.
that's an example of why those pipelines are important, and that's also why, if you ask me which is your favorite hallmark, I would say, if you have five daughter, would you tell me who's your favorite daughter? I'm not going to tell you, because if I'm telling you, you think that I'm telling you that something is better for Alzheimer, when actually the other one is going to be against Alzheimer and easier to develop, for
Uh-huh.
example.
So let's talk about your own work, Nir, because you're very active in the space. I mean, perhaps could you share perhaps what you've been working on recently, perhaps some new discoveries that you've made that are helping us reshape our understanding of healthy aging?
Yeah, sure, and that's also important for investors. Look, um, my one of the things I've been doing is I've been collecting 750 families of centenarians. It's centenarians and their children and the people who are married to
Right.
them. Part is a longitudinal study. There's a lot of things that are going, but this is the point. Centenarians have what we call longevity genes. Um, why is it important to find the underlying genetics of exceptional longevity? Because as it is for disease, pharmaceuticals, who usually trusted investigator based on what they saw in mice, have realized that you have to have a confirmation from human genetics, and that's how you get a drug faster and the drug will be effective. PCSK09 is one of the examples for that. So we're looking for longevity genes in centenarians, not only for the mechanism, but also from a drug development perspective. And in fact, my study has been used to develop two drugs. One is a CTP inhibitor by Merck, and one is an ApoC3 inhibitor by Ionis, as an example. So I think this data is important. Now let me connect it straight to biotech. One of the things that we found is that some centenarians, have mutation in 36. 36 is actually the sirtuin that, when you target, really extends health span and longevity in both sexes. We were busy with 31 and the resveratrol, right? But it's actually the 36 that does it. And I'm on the board of a company that's developing a 36 based treatment that is mRNA based. Remember the COVID
Yeah.
vaccine? So this mRNA can actually deliver drugs, deliver RNA to the liver. And 2 points. First of all, the genetics is really important in order to see if the pathway is relevant to humans. Some of the pathways in mice haven't been relevant to humans. And second, I gave you a specific example of what, and I am on the board of the company because, for me, the human genetic data is really crucial to develop
Hmm.
drugs.
So you're obviously active in the space, Nir, from a institutional perspective, as well as the association you're working with and the companies. So when you come to the Longevity Investors Conference in Gstaad, what can we expect to hear from you?
Um, I don't know yet, but I think you're helping me. I certainly look. The reason I want to talk about those drugs, you can say, why are you talking about existing drugs? You take the wind out of them. But the truth is that those drugs will extend health span by 2 years, 3 years, but our maximal lifespan as humans is 115 years. So we have to realize 35 years, and I'm not saying that's the end, but let's realize 35 years. So we'll need better drugs, combination of drugs,
Yeah.
right? And not only that, it's personalized. Metformin 6% of the population, 3 to 6% cannot tolerate it, right? And other drugs, I told you, I don't think that IGF-1 is good for everyone. So we'll have to get personalized, and we'll get better with the drugs, as we've done for other diseases. So I think it's important for me to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second thing is probably to show the example of genetics. And the third, and I'm not sure how much time, one of the things that I've contributed a lot in the last few months or years is biomarkers of aging. And the biomarkers that I'm dealing with are proteomics. And I think proteomics are going to be good biomarkers, because with the proteins that we measure in elderly, we get the breakdown of their tissues. And we can determine by that not only their overall age, but to see which of the organs is aging more quickly. Some people, their aging is slow, but their brain is aging fast, or their aging is fast, but the liver is good. So we can maybe predict better where is the trouble going to be, and start dealing with that first.
Yeah, I guess you're as young as your oldest organ, right? So there's some work to be done there, both in identifying that, but likewise what you're going to do with that information afterwards. Well, Nir, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and very much looking forward to your presentation in Gstaad. There'll be lots of opportunities for people to interact with you there. So we'll be seeing you in a few weeks' time.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to your update. We're a team in this, so thank you so much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Nir. Catch you soon.